Tim Orton is one of our pioneer Adopt a Home for Wildlife participants. In this interview with Mike Piankowski in July 2019, he gives an update on his efforts to restore his area of tropical dry forest in Montserrat. Tim recounts the challenges of embarking on a long-term project, describes the difficulties caused by a particularly dry season, and his needs for plant identification materials. Mike Piankowski talks about the problems of funding for follow-on work after the initial 2-year period, which is nowadays considered the norm, and the need for project funds to contribute to the capacity of the local partner, in this case the Montserrat National Trust, and to build on the successful pilot work. He stresses that all successful restoration projects take many years. Even if individual grants have to be limited to 2 or 3 years, grant-giving bodies need to be keen to be ready to provide a series of grants. Instead, short-term novel projects rather than longer-term conservation needs seem to be more appealing.
Okay, so would you want to update us on things?
Well, there isn't actually that much to update, I'm afraid. The plan for this year was to gather some seeds from the forest and just scatter them around areas where there isn't much growing at this moment in time. But unfortunately we had a fair amount of rain, and then we've had really virtually nil since. So all of the berries have just died on the bushes, and I haven't been able to do that. Also, digging anything up in this very, very dry situation is not going to help very much, I don't think. So.
No. Well, I think that's interesting. I mean, obviously it's slightly frustrating, but equally, I mean, it illustrates the challenges of trying to deal in this dry forest habitat. One needs to be a little bit patient, wait for the natural variations of the season to make things happen.
Yeah, well, it's a long-term project.
Yes.
It's not it's not going to happen in 3-4 years. It's sort of 10-15 years is the total idea of it. If you look at the forest at the moment, all the leaves are sort of drooping down, they're all sort of crinkled. There's some trees that are actually put fresh leaves on which are now brown and hanging down, so I think it's probably the worst situation we could have had with a lot of rain and then absolutely nothing. So,
but this is the sort of point, as it happens, we've just been making to the funding bodies, say that, look, your schemes are designed oddly. We understand that you need to give grants for 2 or 3 years, but you should have a presumption if something's working that you're going to go a new project to build upon. Whereas the way you're doing it is you want something novel. Well, if you look at the record of all the successful re-establishment programs, it takes several years, and one needs to take it on board. And if people are prepared to work patiently doing this, they need to get some support to do that.
Yeah, absolutely, especially in this environment, because things do grow very, very slowly here. There's not enough water for fast growth.
That's the nature of dry forest.
Yeah, exactly. It's still fairly early in the rainy season. There's only 2 months.
Yes.
So if I get some good rains come through in the next few months, then I'll transfer. I don't think I'm going to get any seeds this year. But then it's a case of keeping hold of them, because the other thing I found is they don't like tap water. Watering them with tap water doesn't seem to do them any good at all.
So you need rains?
As soon as it rains, they brighten right up. But watering them with tap water, they just seem to ignore it. And I've tried watering the surface, and I've tried putting tubes down into the soil to take the water down to the roots. But
it's interesting. I wonder what they do to it, because I mean the tap water here is rainwater, not far removed.
It is actually treated in a small extent.
Well, for our part, we're still trying to get some funding to get the project officer back in. It's been pretty frustrating because our project where we did get funding in our first 2 years from 2016 to 2018 was rated very highly, not just by locals but by independent assessors. We're actually one of the very few bodies applying for grants which includes things about supporting the local conservation body.
Right.
Most people seem to think that's a given, and indeed are coming to them for help, which is bizarre. They haven't got resources to help. So we've just put in a proposal for their grants deadline to basically keep the Adopt a Home for Wildlife going, but add on to it a layer of encouraging and educating about natural pollinators.
Right.
The reason for that is that, well, partly because we have to have the project slightly different from before, just because of the way the grant scheme works, but also if, as one hopes happens, a little bit of small-scale agriculture builds up again here, then the farmers will be under pressure to import pollinators, because big companies like Standard Pollinators, i.e. European, and we want to show that there are some very good pollinators here. You don't need to add things, and if you add things, you're going to have a big risk of losing the native ones. Like for example, the bottle bee is entirely different from the honeybee, and makes, I understand, extremely good honey.
Well, there is actually concern here at the moment with the bees and the fogging that's done for mosquitoes.
Yes.
So hopefully that's being addressed now.
Yes.
I've seen something recently saying that was being addressed.
Well, if we can get that.
Yeah. Well, education is what I need, because this is not my natural habitat. And I don't know my species here, and I've tried using online resources, but there's very little information on dry forests.
Sadly, the project funding application to UK government, which Mike talks about, was not successful. UK OTCF, whilst seeking other funds, is supporting a very basic level of the Adopt a Home for Wildlife programme from its own very limited resources. Effective support to help Montserratians conserve their unique wildlife, following the severe challenges of the volcanic eruptions, would build on initial successes. UK OTCF thanks all those volunteers who have donated time and funds to support this work. Please consider supporting UK OTCF's work in Montserrat. You can donate at www.ukotcf.org.uk. Thank you.